here for, and you know what? Let's just get this right started. Let me introduce. This is a spotlight on Geoff Johns. And Geoff is one of my good friends in this business, one of my best friends in this company, in the business, and I'm just happy to introduce him. This has become a repeating thing for us doing this panel, but let's skip all the ados and let's get him on board, Mr. Geoff Johns. I love doing these panels with you.
I do too. Because I can make fun of you.
Yeah, no, you do. Don't waste any time, by the way, okay? I'll go right into it. But in this one in particular, what's really exciting and what's really interesting is, excuse me, how much your role has changed in the last year. And we've been working side by side now for 16 years.
Yeah,
and
we're old.
We're getting old.
There's probably people in here that were born after we started working together.
And we worked together on so many great projects and with comics. And then when you took on the CEO role at DC Entertainment, you really got more involved in so much more than just the comics. There's a film and TV. And now you're evolving again, and you're stepping down from being executive and really embracing the writer-producer part of the job that you were doing. Could you explain what's changed for you, and more importantly, how you approach every day differently now, or not?
I mean, in a weird way, like more than half my day is exactly the same, because I'm writing and producing, and it's just the other half that now I'm writing more and producing more. And it's focused. There's one thing I'm going to talk about today, which I'm really excited about, but it gives me the opportunity to do stuff that I haven't been able to do.
And I know from just us working together, just how much you love getting involved in the products, and your own depth of knowledge about the characters themselves. Does this give you more opportunity to really get down deeper into the stories and deeper in characters than you allowed before this?
Well, yeah, it's because I get to directly write, directly produce the characters, and no one's going to tell me what to do.
Well, you know what? There's been a lot of talk at the convention. Yesterday, and I think this morning, they let out a little sizzle reel on the Titans. And anybody see the Titans? Okay, so what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to run that piece.
Okay, before we run that, let's make sure if there's anyone that was born after Dan and I started working together. This is not for kids, this trailer. So just a warning, there's language and violence, so if you're sensitive to it, I would cover your eyes and ears for 2 minutes.
For 2 minutes. Okay. Can we get the video up, guys? Okay, here we go.
So good.
Everything led me here. To you. You're the boy from the circus.
You got no place to hide. And I'm feeling like a villain, got a hunger inside. Nowhere to hide from all of this.
Please, can you help me?
Madness, madness.
Where's Batman? Fuck Batman.
There's something evil inside of me.
You're scared, I get it, but you can control it. You don't know what I've become.
Sometimes, when I feel the darkness, it feels good. My mom says there's no such thing as monsters.
I used to think that. I was wrong.
Madness, madness.
Whoa. Okay. Well, now might be not what some people expected. how integral were you in helping set the style and tone of this Titans show? And why did we go in this direction?
Well, that trailer really highlights kind of the show has obviously various tones. It has humor, it has other things, but this show really, I think, highlights Akiva Goldsman and Greg Berlanti and I, when we talked about this, is what Marv and George did with the book in the 80s was really revolutionary. You know, it was the first time that you ever saw two superheroes in bed together, and with Dick Grayson and Corey, and we wanted to do something that kind of honored that spirit, as doing something that pushed the envelope and did things that people hadn't done before. And there's there's a ton of other characters in it, Donna Troy and Jason Todd, and it's a whole Titans universe. But the tone of it with Dick Grayson, we really get into his backstory, and when he first left Batman in the comics, it was not a good break. And that's a huge part of where he is. When we meet him, he is actually trying to leave Robin behind because of what it's kind of become. And of course, people that are familiar with Dick Grayson will kind of guess where we're going to go.
And it's interesting because, when I first started, we first got together working at DC, Teen Titans was a real passion of yours.
Yes.
How is it approaching this series than working on the comic itself when you were writing Teen Titans?
The thing that I love about the Titans, and when we're doing it in the show too, just like, and you and I talked about it when we walked around we were at a convention. Dan and I always start going down memory lane, sorry. But
we always slip down memory lane on this.
We're at this convention, we're walking around, and Dan's like, do you want to do Teen Titans? And I was like, yes, I do want to do Teen Titans. And I pitched him the Superboy, Lex Luthor thing, which we'll get to eventually. And I wanted to really explore the book in the same way that Marv did it, but differently. And we're doing it in the show, is that every one of these great characters, like Raven and Starfire and Dick Grayson and Beast Boy, they're all doorways into these other worlds. Like Rachel's a doorway into the supernatural, and Corey's a doorway into the sci-fi. Every character has their own genre, so to speak. And the first season really is about Rachel and Raven. When we meet her, she's just starting to unlock her abilities and doesn't understand where they're from or why they're there. But like writing the book and writing the show, you look at the same I guess, elements from the canon, like which ones Marv and George did, and like we did it in the same when we relaunched Teen Titans too.
Well, I always laugh because in Teen Titans still is probably one of my favorite lines you ever wrote, which is when Robin goes, "I lied to Batman," but I think we got a new quote.
Yeah, I lied to Batman's maybe a little mundane now, I guess.
Yeah, I can't really make that as a big statement anymore, can I?
And I understand, when this trailer's put together, there's a lot of talk about controversy of the language and attitude and stuff, and this is one part of the show, but I think people are going to be really surprised by the show. I can't wait for you guys to see it. And I can't wait for you to see how deep we go into the DC universe and the Titans universe, particularly in this first season. It's really exciting, and the actors are great. Brent Thwaites plays Dick Grayson, and he's phenomenal. Working with Akiva and Greg has been awesome, and Greg Walker, who's our showrunner on the show too. But an early episode I wrote features the Doom Patrol with Robot Man and Negative Man and Rita Farr, and then we spin that. You guys probably already know we're spinning that to the next show, which is weird and quirky. And if you love Grant Morrison, and if you love Grant Morrison's run on Doom Patrol, you'll love the show.
Well, my favorite one is Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing's one of my favorite characters in DC, and that's another one going to be part of the streaming service.
It is. That's the third show, the Swamp Thing, and James Wan and Atomic Monster are doing that. And that's going to be a whole different genre. So we've got Titans, that is kind of like obviously more adult superheroes. Doom Patrol, which is this quirky, weird, fun. Jeremy Carver's writing it and showrunning. He's amazing. And then Swamp Thing, which is horror. There's all these different genres. And one of the things I'm going to announce is the fourth show right now. It's a show I'm writing and producing. It's the first thing I'm doing, I guess, completely with my company, Mad Ghost. And it's a character very dear to me. That is a doorway to a superhero team that's very dear to me. It's the first character I ever created. And it's a superhero team I wrote for 9 years. See the slide?
The slide?
us a slide.
The slide.
Come on, slide.
So I'm super excited about this. This is like, you know, I got into comics, 1996, my sister passed away in a plane crash, and I met some people who, editors at DC Comics in 1998, and they asked me to pitch them something, and the first thing I did was pitch them Stargirl, which is based on my sister. And it's a very, the character is very positive, very fun, optimistic, just like the show. And the show is about, you know, Courtney Whitmore, whose mom gets remarried to a guy named Pat Dugan, and they move to the small town of Blue Valley, Nebraska. And she discovers that her new stepfather used to be the sidekick to a superhero who was a member of the Justice Society. And she decides to take his partner's old stuff and go for a joyride. And she becomes Stargirl, and it's all about her bringing back the legacy of the Justice Society. So it'll be all the Justice Society characters in that universe too. So I'm really super excited about it. It's very, you know, the tone is very different than the other shows. It's kind of like if Titans, you know, it's like the Flash to Titans Arrow, I guess, in a way.
And it's interesting you say that because it does show a variety of tone. With the other three shows you were discussing, between Titans and Doom Patrol and Swamp Thing probably have more of an R rating.
Yeah,
this is something different than
this
that.
This is PG-13.
There you go.
There will be some language, but they're kids. But it's yeah, it's and I'm doing it with exec producing with me are Greg Berlanti and Sarah Schechter, who I've worked with on tons of this other stuff, Flash and Titans, and I'm excited to work with them.
Do you find it daunting at all? I mean, here you are now, fully responsible. Do you going to approach your work any differently? I mean, now that you're going to be involved in every aspect of the production, is it a different skill set than what you've been doing to date?
Yeah, I mean, it's more involved. You know, it's much more involved and detail oriented. You know how I am with my comics, right? How I get crazy with Doomsday Clock or whatever because it's me and the artist, and it's the same. It'll be the same thing now that I'm fully, you know, writing and producing, and like Stargirl is a great example. As like, you know, we'll cast it. We'll like we talk about we've already talked about how she's going to fight, you know, and what the cosmic staff does, and the other JSA members and costume designers and everything else. So it's a pretty big undertaking because you're creating a whole brand new world. Right. And I love doing that with the artists I've worked with, and now we're doing it with, you know, it's just a lot of other people involved, a lot of other creative people, brilliant creative people that we work with.
That's great. And are you going to be pulling together your own staff on something like this, or how do you?
Yeah, we put together. I'll be putting together writing staff. We'll start that pretty soon, as soon as we get going. But yeah, it's and then we'll get in a room and it's awesome because we just to talk about, okay, what are we going to do for. And we have this story, but what are we going to do for 13 episodes of Stargirl and the Justice Society?
And how different do you see how you approach Stargirl for television than you would be for the comics that you wrote?
Well, tonally it's kind of the same, and the DNA is the same, but you know, with the time and there's many more layers to dive into the story, and there's more time to be had with the characters, and you get deeper into all the characters. So it's, you know, there are similarities and then there's a lot of differences. Sometimes comics are actually more difficult to write because you have a page count and you can't do everything you want. Every month I'm fighting on Doomsday Clock, the page count, but there's no budget, right? So and thankfully on the DC Universe they've given us great budgets to work with. Like really happy to make these shows, and great people to work with. Warner Brothers Television's been awesome, and the whole DC Universe crew I've known for years. So it's, you know, the support system in place is there to make these shows great and different.
You touched on something that was interesting to me. You say you know the DC Universe crew, the guys who've been working on these shows for years. How's it feel to sort of join them in their ranks rather than be on the other side of the table?
Feels good. It feels really good. You know, it's just, I love spending my time telling stories. You know how much I love these characters. We've talked about this a lot, and I really loved my time at DC at a desk. That's what I say, at a desk, though I was not often at that desk. But I really, like, with an opportunity like this with Stargirl, it's so personal to me, and to be able to create and run my own show, and work with the people I've already worked with and love working with. This is the kind of opportunity that I couldn't have had if I had stayed in that role. And you know, thankfully Jim Lee's stepped in, and I think it's amazing, because I think he's amazing. But and I get to work with Jim on this now, and I get to pitch Jim show, which is fun. But yeah, it's weird, because it's, you know, I think it's less different for me than I guess, it's like, you know, again, like I said, it's like 50% of my day is the same.
Is this where you always projected your career to wind up, or some ways to be?
I always wanted to do this. I always loved comics, and I loved TV and film, and I always wanted to merge the two and to be able to do that. And Stargirl being the first character I created, I always wanted to do a Stars and Stripes TV show. Yeah. Like when I pitched you that.
Yeah, I know you did.
When I first met Dan, he was at this animated company called Mainframe that did Reboot, and I met him, and I pitched him Stars and Stripes. I said, this would be a great TV show.
And let me just have to tell that little story there. I was set up, by the way, I thought I was having a meeting with Richard Donner and Geoff Johns and
Kevin
Feige show up at my door to come in. I'm like, who are these two kids? I wanted to meet Richard Donner.
Yeah, and we pitched him Stars and Stripes.
And he pitched me Stars and Stripes. And I'm like, that's great, but I still wanted to meet Richard Donner. Yeah, now I want to meet Geoff Johns and Kevin Feige. Go figure.
That was fun.
And it's interesting, you know, going back to the Donner connection. I mean, you really trained underneath him, and how much of what you learned by working with Donner is now being applied to so much of what you're doing now?
Well, Stargirl for me is like, it's what Patty and I worked on Wonder Woman 1 and 2, and what Dick Donner did on Superman. That Stargirl is the same, it's in that same family, you know, the tone of it at all. It's the tone of Superman the movie and Wonder Woman. That's what we're going for. It's kind of like where I like to live the best, even though it's fun to do all sorts of different tones.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Dick, the way he worked with people, he was so inclusive. I say this to everybody, like, good ideas come from everywhere, and it's about collaboration. That's why, like, when you find people like, Greg Berlanti or Patty Jenkins or Gary Frank or Dan Dio that you really love working with and you have a great creative relationship with, you want to hold on to that relationship, because they're very hard to find. You know how much I trust you.
Yeah.
Like, I run things by Dan on all the time, and when he has an idea, like, I mean, Doomsday Clock, remember that breakfast we had?
I sure do.
Where, like, we had a breakfast, and suddenly Mime and Marionette were created at the end of the breakfast. Yeah. They're my favorite characters in Doomsday Clock. And that was Dan always pushing me to think bigger and different, and it's the same thing with this stuff, but yeah, Dick was always about collaboration and finding voices and people.
And you mentioned Wonder Woman, and I want to get to Wonder Woman now, because now you're really rolled up your sleeves, and you're in part of the script writing process and all this going on.
The script is done.
The script is done.
There you go. So I'm glad.
There you go. How was that for you to be sitting there and really breaking out the Wonder Woman? Which is interesting for me, because we talk about characters all the time. This has never been a character that we've talked about at great lengths, but it seems that, it looks like you've got a real good sense of this, and you've got a real good excitement about what you're doing there.
Yeah, we worked really closely on the first one. So then when Patty and I were talking about the sequel, she was in Japan for some of this, and we were writing the treatment back and forth on the script, and spent a lot of times in a whiteboard. Like, my new office has exactly the same whiteboard my old one did, which is like 20 feet long and 10 feet high. And it has the same one because I had to move it. My assistant, Charlotte, wherever she is, thank you for having that done. And so we plotted it all on that, and it was a blast to do. And she's shooting right now. They just wrapped in Washington, D.C. They're in London.
Are you involved in any other layers of the production, or was you just doing the script process?
Yeah, I'm exec producing.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. But I don't know if I can talk anymore.
Okay, no, I won't push.
Okay.
I know, but you know what? But I'll move on to the next.
We can show some Doomsday Clock stuff, actually.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Be patient.
See all your little notes.
I know these are my notes, not your notes.
Okay.
Look, he's editing me now. They'll figure that. But I want to go to Shazam.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I want to go. There you go. Now, Shazam, I know, has been one of your favorites, and something that you feel very passionate about. And so much of what we're going to be seeing in this movie is really you brought forth in the sensibilities of the character in New 52. How did it feel? And I also know, that Shazam is a project that they've been trying to break and figure out for a very long time. When did you get really involved in the Shazam process to be able to get us to where we are now?
You know, God, years ago, before when I was still just writing, I came on Shazam and started to consult, and there was a point where Warner Pictures, at some point they weren't that interested, and then New Line picked it up, and so we developed it with New Line, and right in between then, when it was kind of on the shelf before it went to New Line, I love Shazam, like love Shazam. I think he's, you know, there's so few, and I talked to Dan about this, there's so few characters that are left, I think, that haven't been mined. You know, I always look at what Frank Miller did to Daredevil and Batman, and what Alan Moore did to Swamp Thing, and what Mark Waid did to The Flash. Like, you see these characters get reinvented and their universes expanded in a way that changes the character forever. And I feel like Shazam has never really had a lot of, you know, a lot of series in between the Fawcett books, and, you know, we had Jerry Ordway's Great Power Shazam series, but beyond that there's been sporadic mini-series over the years, and I think he's one of the few untapped characters we have. And I think that he's also a lot of fun to write. Like, I love writing him, and Gary Frank and I really tried to bring a tone that was, you know, a little bit of a throwback to like things like Goonies and Stranger Things, and you know, which came out afterward, but like where it's kids, like it's fun to do a group of kids and magic and superheroes and big. And so we did the book, and then when we reinvented the character with a bigger family, and then we set it up at New Line, and have been developing it, and finally got rolled. David Sandberg, who's unbelievable. His last movie was Annabelle Creation, which is great, very different than Shazam. Kind of like comparing Titans and Stargirl, I think. But amazing filmmaker, and the movie is a lot of fun. I can't wait for people to see it. And you know, and I've been dying to get back to, and you know, my schedule's been so crazy. Dan's like, can you write more books? Can you write more books? And finally I was like,
I took this job change as an opportunity for us to get more comics out of you.
Yes.
I think that's a good thing. We need more Geoff Johns comics. So that being said,
yeah, Shazam. So I think we're launching a new monthly book in what month?
I think we're looking at it coming out in November.
Yeah, Dale Eaglesham is a writer, the artist. Dale and I worked on Justice Society of America together way back when, and it's awesome to be teamed up with him again. He brings this real. If you guys remember or read my run on Justice Society, there was kind of this Norman Rockwell superhero quality to it, and I talk about Shazam as like if Roald Dahl created a superhero, it would be Shazam. And the Shazam family, and you see them on like there's very few, I think, superhero teams or superheroes that can ride a roller coaster like that. And we'll be exploring, you know, the magical realms of Shazam as they unlock the secrets of the Rock of Eternity. We'll have Mr. Mind, a lot of the classic villains, a lot of new characters. Talkie Tawny, of course, you can't have Shazam without Talkie Tawny. And but it will really continue the story that Gary Frank and I did in New 52, and yeah, we'll be visiting a lot of worlds. Like, some of our inspiration for the book is like Phantom Tollbooth, Lion Witch in the Wardrobe, Harry Potter, of course.
And you have some thoughts about really expanding his world as well, and other realms and other ideas.
Yeah, our idea is the Rock of Eternity is kind of this nexus of the magical realms, the magic lands, and the kids discover these. In the first issue, they discovered this giant underground subway station with all these different subway cars, and who knows where they go. And this is them about exploring and unlocking the secrets of magic and the origins of magic. And
one of the reasons why we haven't had a Shazam book is I really wanted to hold this for you, especially with the film. There's a very clear, distinctive point of view, and it sounds to me like the new comic will be able to match at the same tone that's in the film, and also what you established and your earlier parts of it too.
Yeah, well, it's fun to, like, these superheroes are superheroes with powers with no manual. They don't know how the powers work. They're going to unlock new powers. They don't know really exactly why they have the powers, or know that they're the champion, but they're not they're not quite sure what their mission is, and they'll discover that in this series.
And and I'm going to get into more comic stuff too, because originally this was going to be, we were holding this for you and Gary Frank, but just schedules started to collide. You have certain artists that you feel very comfortable with. You talk about trust and things of that nature, and Gary Frank naturally jumps to the top of the charts. But Dale, you worked with in the past. What is it about these artists that you enjoy working with?
Well, I mean, you know, as a writer too, like you find, I've worked with a lot of artists, and Gary Frank and Dale Eaglesham's the same kind of artist. They're both very emotionally driven. They're all about emotion, and they don't do what I call like kind of canned expressions. If you see an image from Gary Frank, it's unique. You've never seen it before. Doomsday Clock #6. Actually, can we? Chelsea,
We're going to get there in a second.
We're not there yet.
This was the transition.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this was it.
Yeah. Well, you can see his artwork in it, and it's very, very expressive. So the artists that I tend to gravitate towards are, clean lines. I just like that style, and very emotional. For me, Doomsday Clock is supposed to be as much a character book and an emotional book as it is anything else.
Yeah, and and now I did want to get to Doomsday Clock because of this. And again, I actually wanted to save this because I really wanted to get a little more into the logic and the thought process behind building this book. I don't know if we've talked about this in other panels before, but I mean, this is a very daunting project to take on, and it's something that when people know and understand what Watchmen is, you've got to meet it head on and in some ways try to surpass it or expand on it, instead of just trying to duplicate it. How did you first come to starting Doomsday Clock? And then from there, what have you felt you've added along the way that's really blown this project out into the shape it's in now?
Well, first off, everybody that's reading Doomsday Clock, thank you for picking the book up. Gary Frank and I have been really, it takes me 5 times as long to write this as any other comic I've ever written, and it takes him just as long to draw it, clearly from his beautiful artwork. Let's look at a few pages.
Yeah, let's go through some pages.
This is the first page, and we see little Erica Manson, aka Marionette, there. But his expressions and Gary's artwork there, so if you're going to do something like as insane and crazy as daring to tap into Watchmen for a story. Gary and I were only going to do that, and I've told this story kind of probably a lot, but Gary and I were only going to do it if we had a great story, and I had a great story I thought to tell, and I wanted to tell it despite anybody saying, "You're crazy, it's never going to work," which I love. When people tell me it's never going to work, I'm like, I can't wait to do it. Don't do Shazam, go do Batman. Like, no, I want to do Shazam. Shazam's never going to work. Like, it's just constant.
You breeze across that, but that's been basically a staple of your career. What people don't realize is that when Geoff took on Teen Titans and Green Lantern, those were pretty much exhausted properties at DC. We thought they weren't going to be anything. As a matter of fact, I was told not even to use them, but to put them on a shelf and let them rest for a little while because we have no ideas for them. And not only did we not rest them, but we pretty much went from whatever existing series almost right directly into the new interpretation. And you've constantly made that attack. You've gone after projects that nobody else wanted, and I think that's really just a staple of your career. I mean, we go back to Booster Gold all the time. There's a love for Booster Gold, but there's no real interest in Booster Gold. But you had an idea and a story that you needed to tell. This is completely different. This is a story that people would want to tell but are too afraid to, and which makes it a different type of challenge for you.
Yeah, the depth of this story, it's obviously influenced a lot by what's going on. As the story evolved, I really had this story of Dr. Manhattan and why he's in the DC Universe, which will be revealed very soon, and the characters that come here in search of him. As the comic books evolved, it's gone to a different level. The Superman theory's gotten bigger. The background of it all has gotten a lot bigger. The issue 6 coming out, you'll see the supervillains now point of view of what's going on in the world as we focus on My Marionette and the Joker in that issue. And I guess the book continues to evolve as we work on it. It's still staying exactly to what the story we set out to tell is. Like, nothing about our story has changed, but I think the scope and the depth of the story has changed dramatically, just organically, as we've gotten into it.
Well, we're going to talk about issue 6 for a second, because issue 6 is coming out, I think, in a couple of weeks. Next week. So
Next Wednesday.
So it is probably a real turning point for the book, and something that is tonality, I think, much more aggressive than the previous 5 issues.
It is. It's about the beginning. There's 2 things going on. It's both about Mime Marionette and the world of the criminal metahuman today, and how it's responding to all these accusations of the Superman theory that metahumans are actually created by the government, and the superhero supervillain narrative is also created by the government. Is that the reason that there's so many American metahumans is because the American government's behind them. It's not a coincidence when you go, how many superheroes are in Germany, and there's 2 in the DC Universe, or there used to be. There's more now. But it's all about kind of the superhuman arms race that's sending our world, the DC Universe, onto the ledge of super war, they're calling it. And the villains are reacting to that, and the villains are wondering what their role is in it. And Black Adam has said any metahuman who wants asylum can come to Kandak, and he's building his own metahuman army. So that's half that story is about kind of the political temperament and the climate of what it is to be a supervillain in the DC Universe during this time. The other half of it is the origin story of Mime and Marionette, which is a very violent, tragic origin story. But I also think a very emotional one, probably the most emotional story we've had in the book.
How difficult it is to juxtapose those 2 stories, one that's set in a tonality familiar with the DCU, another one that's very, very much embedded within the Watchmen sensibilities. And then putting them together, it almost must feel like whiplash as you're going back and forth.
Some of it is. I mean, the villains, it's a little bit less because they're villainous.
Yeah.
But you do see, like, Marionette's reaction when she sees, because they eventually get to this underground meeting between villains. Like, all these villains are gathered together, and the Joker says, it's the I don't know, he's like, I don't know what they're calling it today, the Legion of Supervillains, the Society of Evil, like, whatever name du jour they've picked this time, as they all freak out about what's happening, and you see this huge gathering of villains, and Marionette's first reaction, because on the Watchmen world, there's much fewer superhumans. Her reaction is, this is amazing. This is wonderful. And the chaos of the DC Universe, I think when we first set out to compare Watchmen and DC, I think people thought, oh, Watchmen's going to be the screwed up darker Earth, and DC is the happy great Earth. And that's both true in some ways and not true in a lot of ways, because the reality is DC, with all these superheroes, and I think, Ozymandias said it right in issue 5. He said, they're busy just fighting each other, tripping over their capes. Like, there's so many of them, and all they do is battle. And I think some of that is the narratives have almost become just about superheroes, and they've lost that perspective of people, of the world, and that's something that we're touching upon.
It's interesting, also just going back to Doomsday Clock for a second. You're very excited about the back matter. We have probably just as much of a conversation about the backup material as you do the main story, because of its relevance to what's happening in the book. When you're constructing the back matter, how much planning, forward thinking is going into the material as you're building it?
To be honest, the back matter stuff, and I know there's a bunch of you who skip it, like, I get it, there's a lot of text to read.
Yeah.
I know this because one of my friends says, oh, I love the new issue. I'm like, oh, what'd you think of the back matter? He's like, oh, I didn't read that. But then he did. It's very, some of it I know right away, and some of it, honestly, I write the whole issue, and then I'm like, that's the back matter.
Right.
In issue 6, that happened. It's like, okay, the back matter, like, I have to kind of see the whole issue and say, okay, that's the area I want to put a microscope on and zoom in and see. There's this one super obscure character in issue 6 that becomes like the anchor of this 6 pages of back matter, and I just got lost into this character, and he's so minor, and I've never even written him before, but I got lost into the backstory of this character and created this huge backstory, and suddenly I want to write a whole series on this guy, but it changes, but it takes days and days and days to write that stuff too, because it's a different kind of muscle. Like, this whole Doomsday Clock, this whole comic book is, Gary and I talk about it a lot, it's changed how we think about comics. It's changed how I approach comics. Like, I actually have a really hard time clicking back into the idea of doing a comic book with double page spreads and splashes and big kind of just people throwing around tanks and punching each other. I don't know how I'm going to get my head ever into a space like that. I think with the projects I've got coming up that we're talking about, they've all kind of evolved and are different challenges on their own, because I want Shazam to be very, very different than Doomsday Clock, but be as deep and interesting and emotional as Doomsday Clock, but in its own way, its own Shazam way, and its own Shazam style. But I find like to give up a storytelling to a double-page spread now is really hard. It's really hard to give those 2 pages up to just one image.
I was going to ask this question, and you gave me the perfect lead into it. It's about evolution as a writer. I've seen your style evolve over the years, and go from this rawness to this real sharp and crystal clear understanding and storytelling, crispest storytelling that's in the business right now. How much of that is just the evolution of you through your work? How much is that because you're working with on other projects that are film or TV? How much is working in different mediums affected you as a comic book writer?
Oh, it's affected. It's not just working in the mediums. It's working with people, like working with all the different writers and producers and directors and artists that I've worked with. It's changed it quite a bit. You know, it just pushes me into a different space, and also what I'm interested in has changed as a writer. You know, I love DC superheroes, but I also want I need more to kind of write about. And so and Doomsday Clock is kind of the perfect crazy opportunity to do that. And I like surprising people. I think doing things like Doomsday Clock and Shazam and the other projects that we'll talk about in a second, they're different than anything I have ever done. And they're different than anything that's out there on the stands. I really want to deliver books. Like if I'm going to write comics, I want to write stuff that you guys haven't seen from me before. And I want to write stuff that's worth your time, because there's so many comics out there, and there's a lot of great ones. But to be interested for myself, you know me, I get bored easy. I need to do something new and challenging. That's why I take on crazy characters like Booster Gold or Aquaman, or the other stuff I'm about to do.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in a second, but I actually want to go backwards 1 second. Just take what you thought here, because there's something interesting. What you're saying is, have you ever gone back and looked at your older work and said, oh, I would do it differently, or I'd want another shot at it with a different mindset because I see it differently than I am today?
I definitely go back and look at it and think, you know, there's stuff that I'm both surprised I did and like, oh wow, like I don't even remember doing that, but that's cool. And there's stuff that I would have done differently now, but I've never looked at a book and gone, I want to go back and redo that book.
Yeah.
Because I just take, you know, whenever I've looked at books, you know, I've written a lot of stories and you know, some work better than others, and you always learn from both. But you learn from like the stories, the books that don't work. You learn from all that and try and apply it to the next thing. I don't, you know me, like I don't love I rarely, the only book I ever really went back to was Justice Society of America, I think. And that was a short break. That was like a 6-month or 8-month break. But usually I like getting me back on Green Lantern, that would be a feat.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Just because I feel like even though I probably would do things differently here and there, I'm very happy with that I got to do it, and I look back at it with fondness, but I don't look back at it with, oh, I wish I could go back and change and you know, make checkerboard Green Lanterns.
Okay, well, since, you know, and now we're already seeing now, just basically by adding Shazam in, we've just doubled your workload in comics, but I know you're coming out more with more stuff. And one of the projects we announced a while back now is coming to fruition, which is Three Jokers.
Yeah,
Three Jokers.
Yeah.
And we have an image now. First time to see the three Jokers together.
So this is a story Jay Fabok and I have been talking about for a while now, and we're doing it. It's 3 issues, 3 46-page prestige format issues, and we're working on it right now. That cover I think is beautiful. Jay's one of the, I think, best artists, and one of the few kind of up-and-coming artists. Like he's relatively a young guy. He hasn't been in the business that long, and I think it's actually rare to find artists as good as him evolving as quickly as he does. There's a lot of Brian Bolland in that, actually.
Yeah.
When you look at it. But this story is it's focused on, I don't want to spoil it too much because everyone's like, oh, it's not about, other dimensions or other Earths or anything like that. It's a very grounded, emotional story about the mystery of the Joker and Batman's kind of realization that there's more than one operating, and what does that mean? And it really focuses on Bruce, Barbara, and Jason. Those are the three characters it's really focused on.
And also, we're doing this on the Black Label branding, even though we understand that some of the storyline still plays within the DCU itself.
Yeah, it's, when you guys suggested to be under DC Black Label, I thought Jay and I were both really excited about it because it's an opportunity to just tell our story without any constraints. It's been a blast so far. It's going to take us a while to get it done, but we're hoping it'll be out sometime in the winter.
Yeah, and this is something also you've been talking about for a while. How much of this story exists from the way you originally conceived it to where we are right now?
This story is exactly the same as, I pitched you the ending of the first
I know.
issue probably a year ago, and it's exactly the same down to the panel and the line of dialogue. It's evolved and grown just because it's been written, it's been written. But it's, I've never had a chance to tell a Batman event.
Yeah.
I've never really told a Batman event or beyond Batman Earth 1. I've never really done a Batman story, and part of that is because I feel like Batman's awesome and he's great, and there's so many great Batman stories that if I'm going to tell a Batman story, I want to make it a really special, cool, amazing story that no one's ever seen before. And there's been a lot of Joker stories too, so how can I tell a Joker story that's emotional and epic? And this is all about character. This is all about the kind of shared pain between Bruce and Barbara and Jason, and how that's affected each of them, and what the Joker really wants and what he's up to, at the core of it, a mystery of, like, what does the Joker really want? Is it just random? Is it chaos? Is it, it's all about scars and healing wrong, healing right, and pain, and it's, it's the Joker. Like, I could tell one Joker story. This is the Joker story that I'll tell.
And it's funny, you keep on saying Joker, so in your mind, do you see this more of you writing Joker, or do you see yourself writing Batman?
I always think of it as a Joker story.
Yeah, so, okay, that's it. Because it's like you're saying, I was always interested by your lack of interest in Batman, which always seems, for most people who don't know this, anybody who wants to come to DC, usually you come in there because they want to work on Batman. It's one of the things we hear over and over again, and that's the one thing you've avoided consistently. And even now, I feel like you're avoiding it still by calling this a Joker story and doing a Batman story.
I guess so. I actually love Batman. Like, he's one of my favorite characters. But again, it feels like and this does explore a new facet of who Bruce Wayne is that's never been explored in the comics. There's a story that we're doing that I'm surprised has never been explored, that really tackles a core emotional issue of Bruce Wayne, and it does connect him with Joker in a way that's kind of changing it forever. Like, by the end of the series, Bruce and Joker will have a relationship that is completely different than the one that they have now, and yeah, I guess, Dan, part of it is like my gravitational pull towards the underdog characters, the characters that need help, the characters that haven't been so unlocked, that they're already at the top of the mountain. I tend to like to do new characters like, Mime and Marionette, or like when we launched Teen Titans, everyone said that was going to get canceled. It's a mistake. Why would I waste my time on the Justice Society? And the truth, or Shazam or Aquaman, and the truth is because these characters are great, and I want them to, like, now we have an Aquaman movie, and we have a Shazam movie, and we're going to have a Stargirl TV show. Like, I want these characters to be out there because they're wonderful characters, and I want people to fall in love with them because literally this happened to me this week. I was looking at a comic somewhere, and someone said, "Oh, you read comics?" I said, "Yeah, I read comics." And they say, "I do too." And we talked about it for a while. And it was in the middle, like just like a store or something. And but to me, it was I guess that is funny. It's a bonding experience. Just like I love Comic-Con because this is a pilgrimage. Like, where else do people come because they love something so much? And it really brings all of us together. And part of my desire to connect with people because I never had a lot of friends growing up. You know, I moved from Detroit to Pontiac one summer, and my brother and I had nothing but comics. But anyone we met, my best friend in high school, he was reading comics, and I'm like, oh, you read comics? I love comics. And it didn't matter that he was reading Boris the Bear, which is a pretty funny comic, but not my kind. But it was great just to. That's how I have always kind of connected. All my friends are comic friends.
Okay, then you went there. What were you reading? What were you reading at that?
When I was a kid?
Yeah.
I was reading Flash, Hulk, Justice League International.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Man of Steel, Superman, Suicide Squad, Batman and the Outsiders, Captain America, The Fall of the Mutants. I did read that. But anyway, any kind of, for me it's a connection, and so whenever somebody likes a character that's not Batman, because Batman and Superman is so universal, I mean, everyone loves those characters, and if they don't, they should be thrown out of Comic-Con. Yeah. But to love Aquaman or to love Mera is that's some deep level nerdism going on right there.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny, I always just say that there was a shorthand of finding other comics fans, and 30, 40 years ago, it used to be a Batman or Superman symbol because it wasn't as prevalent as it is out there right now. And then all of a sudden everybody has Batman hats and Superman hats, and then it went to Green Lantern, and then all of a sudden Green Lantern becomes popular. And it's hard to find that secret handshake of what we collect that identifies comic fan to comic fan, more so than pop culture fan to pop culture fan. And
well, that's why I love Comic-Con, because back in the old days when we were young and kids, I only knew another kid who liked comics because I saw him reading comics. There was no forums, there was no social media, there was nowhere else to meet them. And then Comic-Con, the first time I went to a comic convention, it was like, oh my God, there's so many potential friends here. It's true.
It is. I mean, that's the fun part about all these experiences, is really getting into it. I want to go back to your book for a second. You had a very clear point of view on Aquaman when you came in, from during the New 52 days.
Very clear. We got in a big fight over it.
We had a fight about it.
Dan called me and said, you're ruining, what would you say?
I don't know.
You said, this is the
doesn't matter, I'm wrong. So.
No. Well, this is the kind of stuff I love, though, because Dan always, we have these great creative arguments because we're both passionate, and that's why I trust him so much. But Aquaman, I wrote the first issue, and Dan read it, and he said, you can't do that restaurant scene. I said, that's the best scene in the book. And we had a great philosophical conversation about it, but the cool thing about Dan, and I'm going to give you major props here, because the cool thing about Dan is he actually helped me amp up some of the other action in the book to balance it, which I did.
Yeah.
I did do a rewrite of some of his notes, but when I said that restaurant scene, I know it's a little bit over the top, but trust me, I think it's going to work really well. He's like, great. Yeah. He didn't, once we had the conversation, that's why, when I'm talking about being on the writer-producer side, working with people that you love and respect and trust their opinion, and there's a lot of great people in the business, but it's the ones that you find, this is for all you potential writers and artists and producers and directors out there, it's the people you find that you connect with, and you can just have a creative conversation, and you listen and trust, and you don't always take the idea, or sometimes you oh my God, they saved the idea.
Yeah.
That's I think that's why we've worked well together.
Well, it is, and Aquaman actually has become a staple for us, and even when we talk to other writers and artists now, because what Geoff did in that scene, if you're not familiar with it, was he addressed all the ridiculousness of Aquaman and put it on the table, and basically he said, oh, you talk to the whole talking to fish or eating fish.
Yeah, some guy's like, how does it feel to be nobody's favorite superhero?
Yeah.
And he was like, really? But having a scene where we just kind of put it all out there, and it was, and it's kind of carried over now. I'm excited for everyone to see the movie. I mean, there's some stuff tomorrow you're going to see that's going to blow your minds. Yeah, it's cool. And you guys already saw Black Manta, which is perfect. He's
so
perfect. Good. James Wan did a wonderful job on this. The scope of his film is crazy. Dan and I were just right before this. We went down to Mattel just to see the action figures.
Yeah.
And all the sharks with saddles on them. It's ridiculously cool.
Oh, it's awesome.
But it is fun to see Aquaman. I think when we first started working together, if you said there's going to be an Aquaman movie, people would have been like, no one wants to see Aquaman, no one likes Aquaman, no one. I like whenever I hear that, I get really mad. Like Aquaman's, you know, that's about every character. In DC, I love every. I just have always loved every character, and the more obscure, almost the better.
I agree, because I think that's, for me, the corners of DC that I've always loved are the most quirky edges. That's why the Metal Man and Doom Patrol, the fact that there's going to be a Doom Patrol series is astounding.
Yeah.
Just astounding.
Yeah, and it's going to have Crazy Jane and, you know, Rita Farr, and I mean, again, if you love the Grant Morrison run, you'll probably see that stuff in there. Like, it's insane what we're doing.
So we only have a couple minutes left, so I want to do a couple of questions right away. Go back to Three Jokers. Three Jokers. Why I was asking that question about you really clearly understand these characters. Is there one Joker in your mind that is the true Joker?
You'll have to read that book to find out.
Okay, let me try again. Do you have distinctions between the three Jokers that identify them as different characters?
100%. But that might just be from my head.
Okay.
You'll see it. There's this really fun scene. I mean, I'll spoil it. Jay's gonna probably send me an email. Why'd you tell him a scene from the book? But I will anyway. There's this really fun scene where there's Joker's. He drives his truck. I won't tell you what it is and what's in it, and he goes to the woods, and there's a cabin with a light on, and Joker walks up to the cabin. I've told you the scene.
Yeah,
and he knocks on the door, and the door opens, and there's a Joker standing there wearing a Hawaiian shirt, and the Joker says, "That's my shirt."
Okay. I can see them having those problems.
Yes.
All right, so we covered Three Jokers. We covered Shazam. We covered Doomsday Clock.
Yep.
Again, this is exciting for me because it gets more of you back into the comics, which I feel has been sorely lacking in our line, honestly. And we've talked about this. It's always been that void that we needed to fill again. But you are going to take on more projects, which is even more amazing for me. And now this is where we're going to do a little bit of a dance here. So I'm going to try to pull information out of him, and he's not going to give me anything. So I'm going to see how I can do this. Okay. So you have ideas that you want to go forward with. There's another project that we've discussed, another one that's already in the pipeline, as we like to say. Can you give us a little insight about what else you'll be doing come next year?
Well, I'm doing Doomsday Clock. Obviously, Killing Zone. Killing Zone is the new thing. So there's this. If you want to show the logo, there's this banner called the Killing Zone, and it is kind of like Doomsday Clock has been such a huge challenge for me, and I love that it's a challenge. And, you know, Three Jokers is a challenge, and Shazam's a lot of fun. And I wanted to, like, what my next project is, I wanted to challenge myself again. And, like, if I did Doomsday Clock, well, okay, what can be harder to do than Doomsday Clock? What can be harder to pull off? And so I've got this idea called, it's a banner called The Killing Zone of a bunch of different books, and essentially they form one big tapestry, even though they're individual titles. It's a story that takes place from the 1940s to the 2040s, over a century. It's 100 years, and there'll be different characters in there. Some characters that haven't been at the forefront of DC for decades,
Possibly, yeah.
and then a lot of new characters too. But it won't be out till, you know.
Yeah, well, we'll see it in early next year. How about that? Mid next year.
A little before mid next year.
A little before May-ish of the next year. May-ish.
It's out May 2019.
Okay, good. I got one thing. Chuck. Okay, next thing. We talk about Killing Zone, and we talk about this. This is for all intents and purposes, is your pop-up imprint. We use that expression in our offices when something is so clearly driven by a single creator's vision that the books that aggregate in this thing are all really tied to one person's single idea and thought of what they should be telling. We've done that with Gerard Way on Young Animal. We're doing this with Neil Gaiman on Sandman Universe, and Killing Zone is your baby, and it's none of the characters that you're associated with, which is kind of interesting to me.
No, every character that has their own book, I don't think I've ever really written them ever. And all the new characters, clearly I've never written because they're brand new.
Then why, what's bringing you to this particular area?
Well, you know, it's again like with Doomsday Clock, I really wanted to kind of challenge what my, I think, frustration with the political climate in America and everything was, and that's being carried out, metaphorically through the characters, and there's more to come in that. With this, it actually, the idea for it sparked when I was in Washington, D.C., and we drove by the White House, and someone said, "I can't stand to look at the White House." And I said, "Why?" I said, the White House is the White House. It's like the American flag is the American flag. Like, for me, it can't be about the politicians or anything. It's got to be about our country, and I want to kind of take it back to the people. You know what I mean? I want to kind of take America back from being a political pawn. Like, I want to be proud to be American, and it's not going to be because of politicians. It's going to be because of the people in our country, and so that's kind of where the kind of the first idea started. And then the other half of it was, I went to Dan and I said, I want to do what characters aren't we doing anything with? And he kind of pitched a few. I go, I want the worst characters. I want the characters no one's pitched you. And when you say, hey, will you do this? They go, no. And Dan was like, I don't know. And so we talked, and I went back home and I looked at my comic collection and I found him, and I'm like, oh my God, here it is. And those characters, and I won't get into the specific titles now because it's a little early. I'll probably talk more about it in October. But it is a very important story to me personally. It's going to be a very big story. It's going to be, again, over a century, a year long, multiple books, all tying in, like individual stories, but all tying into one grand tapestry of stories. And it's also stuff that I'll be working on in developing in film and television as well. So it'll kind of all be one thing for Mad Ghost.
Excellent. All right, it looks like we're out of time here. Geoff, I want to thank you as always.
Thanks
for your time
as always,
here.
Dan. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.